Chapter 12. Ron's thoughts churned, a frantic current amidst the bottle's chaos. As clashing blows echoed and Marcus held his ground, a daring theory sparked in Ron's mind. If divinants like him were tied to divinity, to the very essence of the divine weapons wielded by the luminaries, then perhaps his own latent powers could finally manifest. He didn't fully grasp his abilities yet, but a profound spark of enlightenment was stirring, refusing to be ignored. Marcus, locked in a brutal fight with the monstrous figure, caught Ron's distant gaze and sighed inwardly. Not again, he thought, recognizing the familiar trance Ron was slipping into. Usually, this meant Ron would become lost in his thoughts, oblivious to the world burning around him. But this time, something was different. A fiery, unnatural glow blazed in Ron's eyes, fierce and captivating. Marcus hesitated, yet found himself strangely reassured. The glow, the raw determination etched on Ron's face, felt profoundly mystical. "Whatever it is you're doing, or planning to do, I hope you do it fast," Marcus thought, gritting his teeth as he dodged another vicious attack from the possessed host. Despite his usual grumbling, Marcus trusted Ron, and that fiery glow made him believe that whatever Ron was about to unleash, it would be extraordinary. Lost in his trance, Ron's mind unraveled mysteries he hadn't known lay within him. His martial arts, every form, every strike, were suddenly infused with crystal clarity. Concepts he'd never grasped before now resonated with profound understanding. His movements, once instinctive, now hummed with something greater. He began to connect his divinity with his weapons, his sword and his very being becoming conduits for divine will. A bright radiance began to emanate from Ron's body. He had seen this glow during his trial, but then, he hadn't understood it. Now, it felt different. It wasn't an external phenomenon but a part of him, guiding him as if the light itself possessed a will. He murmured softly, his voice barely audible, "This is the same aura Father showed. The divinance of the war god. The blessing of the god of war." The world around him seemed to slow. Sounds dimmed, movements blurred, and Ron's focus sharpened until the battle was a mere blur of fleeting shadows. He was awakening, stepping onto a stage of power he had only glimpsed before. This was what it meant to be a divinant. It wasn't just strength or speed, it was the manifestation of a divine blessing, a direct connection to a greater force. Ron's voice broke the eerie stillness. "Marcus, stand back." Marcus obeyed instinctively, pulling away and watching as Ron raised his weapon. The glow around him intensified, engulfing him in fiery brilliance. His sword gleamed as divinity poured into it, enhancing his speed, power, and defense. Ron shifted his stance, positioning himself for a strike that carried the weight of his newfound enlightenment. Ron's voice rang out, raw and commanding. "Hate Ender's strike." With incredible speed, he lunged, his form blurring as he delivered the finishing blow. His strike didn't touch the host's body but aimed directly at the spirit's aura, piercing through the darkness. The possessed figure let out an otherworldly scream, the spirit's malice clinging on. "Hunger, hate, feed." Its voice echoed, desperate and feral, before slowly diminishing into silence. The glow surrounding Ron faded as the monstrous spirit disintegrated into nothingness. It was over. Overwhelmed by the success, Ron leapt into the air with comical exuberance. "I did it!" he exclaimed, punching the sky. Marcus, still catching his breath from the exhausting fight, couldn't help but smirk as he approached. "Hate Ender strike?" Marcus asked, his tone dry but tinged with amusement. "Where did that come from?" Ron shrugged sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know. It just felt right. Ending their malice, their hate, and then, strike. Nothing fancy. Ha ha ha." Marcus let out a tired laugh, shaking his head. "Cool." The two shared a brief moment of levity as the soldiers watching from the sidelines gaped in awe. To them, the fight had been a revelation, an extraordinary display of prowess beyond their comprehension. But to Ron and Marcus, it was just another step in their journey, one victory, one revelation, and countless mysteries still waiting to be unraveled. Aftermath and report back in town. The two accompanying soldiers wasted no time reporting to Chief Alistair. Their expressions were grave but tinged with awe as they recounted the events. Alistair listened intently, his brows furrowing with each word. When they described the spirit possession and the monstrous aura surrounding the host, he could hardly believe it. Yet, their vivid account of Ron's actions, his calm precision, his radiant divinant power, and his incredible finishing strike left no room for doubt. Alistair leaned back, exhaling sharply. So it's true. A malignant spirit. And Lord Eric's son. A divinant. Shaking his head in disbelief, he began drafting the official report, meticulously recording every detail. He knew this information was too important to keep local. This must go to the chiefs and to Lord Eric himself, he muttered, his pen scratching furiously across the parchment. Meanwhile, in their rented room, Marcus, ever the dependable assistant, was busy with his usual duties. He sat at a desk, drafting a thorough report of the mission. As the team's unofficial secretary, bodyguard, butler, and all-around handler, Marcus excelled at turning chaos into order. The report included everything: the battle details, strategic insights, and even observations on the divinant blessing technique. Once satisfied, Marcus leaned back with a contented sigh. All done, he announced. I'll send this to Lord Eric immediately. Turning to Ron, he asked, anything you want to add? Ron waved a dismissive hand but then grinned. Nah, I'll leave it to you. Just make sure you include my awesome moves. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Seriously? Ron laughed but quickly shifted his tone. Okay, but seriously, don't forget to highlight the divinant blessing. It's clearly the best way to deal with these spirits. The council needs to know that. Marcus gave a small nod. Of course. I didn't miss a thing. He folded the report neatly, sealed it, and called over their trusted messenger bird. The creature, a highly trained avian gifted to them at the start of their emissary mission, was no ordinary bird. Hardened by rigorous training, it was swift and capable of surviving in the harshest conditions. Marcus tied the report to its leg and gave a simple command. Go. Deliver this to Lord Eric. The bird took off, cutting through the sky with purpose. A new wave and a new path back at the village. Trouble stirred once more. Another flock of possessed had emerged, not a large number, but enough to send waves of fear through the townsfolk. A soldier rushed to inform Ron. Sir, we need your help. Ron smirked, turning to Marcus. Ready for another round, mate? His confidence was unshaken. Ron and Marcus sprang into action, and this time, with experience on their side, the battle was swift. Together, they efficiently subdued the possessed without harming their hosts, their teamwork seamless. The soldiers stood in awe as Ron and Marcus demonstrated an intricate dance of combat, precision, and restraint. Once the possessed were incapacitated, Ron instructed the soldiers to tie up the hosts and let them rest. Arrangements were made for their interrogation and care. Ron turned to Chief Alistair with a nod. They're all yours now. Make sure they get the care they need. My work here is done. As the duo prepared to leave, Ron felt a sense of fulfillment. His mind, however, was already on the next steps. It's time to head back to the Rugal estate, he said. Lord Eric's pride and a royal summons. Meanwhile, the messenger bird arrived at the estate, where Lord Eric received Marcus's report. Sitting in his study, Eric's eyes scanned the parchment carefully, his expression shifting from concern to pride. So, divinity is the key, he murmured to himself. This changes everything. Now we have the edge. We finally know how to approach this. He immediately summoned the council, updating their defensive strategies based on the insights from Marcus's report. Lord Eric's chest swelled with pride at his son's achievements. Ron, he said softly to himself, you've proven yourself beyond what I could have imagined. After ensuring his own domain was prepared, Eric rallied his forces, blending the strengths of his warriors with the divinant's unique abilities. When the next wave of possessed spirits struck the gates of the Rugal estate, the defenders were ready. The divinants took the lead, their divine essence and precise techniques proving unmatched against the malignant spirits. Their ability to destroy the spirits without harming the hosts set them apart, and their presence inspired those around them. Yet, it was the warriors who held the line, their discipline and bravery ensuring that the defenses never faltered. They worked seamlessly alongside the divinants, using their expertise in combat to protect the estate's walls and hold off the possessed until the divinants could finish the job. The battle was swift and decisive, the combined forces demonstrating a harmony of strength and strategy. When the dust settled, the hosts were spared, and the nomad healers worked tirelessly to nurse them back to health. The estate stood strong, a testament to the unity and power of its defenders. A father's pride and a son's refusal. Lord Eric stood before his son, his usually composed demeanor softened with pride. You have done a great job, Ron. You've saved countless people with your discovery. I am proud, not just as the lord of our domain, but as your father. You, my son, have proven yourself to be not only our top warrior but a true beacon for humanity. Ron grinned sheepishly, scratching his head. Of course, father. Well, Marcus helped. His laughter faded abruptly as he caught himself, suddenly remembering to whom he was speaking. His posture stiffened as he quickly reverted to his serious mode, his tone clearing. Ahem. Eric, though amused, didn't address the slip. Anyway, son, your contribution will greatly aid humanity. The sword god himself has received news of your exploits, and he is most pleased. He wishes to see you. Ron's eyes widened at the mention. The sword god? He shifted nervously, already sensing where this was headed. No. I'm sure you want me to go, and I know he wants me to be there, but absolutely not. I can't do it, father. He'll only limit me, put rules on my adventure. So that's a big no. Eric raised an eyebrow, clearly anticipating his son's objection. I haven't finished speaking yet, he said, his voice calm yet firm. But yes, you are correct in guessing. I'll send him your reply, and I'll explain it to him. Ron sighed in relief, his posture relaxing. Thanks, father. That's one less thing to worry about. He paused, then glanced up hesitantly. Are you sure you don't want me to meet him? Eric nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's your decision, Ron. The council members seated nearby exchanged discreet glances, struggling to contain their amusement. It was rare to see Lord Eric interrupted mid-conversation, rarer still for him to allow such interruptions. Watching the two interact like a normal father and son was unexpectedly delightful, especially witnessing someone boldly objecting to the Lord. Summoning a guard, Eric spoke next. Bring Marcus here. Moments later, Marcus entered the room, his usual composed expression unwavering. The council rose, acknowledging both Ron and Marcus with their utmost respect. One of them stepped forward, presenting badges of honor to the duo. Another followed, handing gold coins to them for their travel allowance, along with a personal reward for each of their achievements. Marcus took the reward graciously, sending nearly all the gold to his family back home, keeping only a modest amount for himself. Ron, meanwhile, was less restrained, pocketing his share with a grin, though he didn't fail to express his gratitude to the council. Eric addressed his son once more, his voice steady and commanding. Ron, you have proven your worth. You are most useful when you dedicate yourself to your craft. Humanity needs you. Your skills as an investigator will only grow, and I trust you to handle what lies ahead. We've received reports of disturbances in a northern town. I want you to head there next and investigate thoroughly. Always send us a report. Eric glanced at Marcus, adding, 3 messenger birds will be assigned to accompany you on your travels. 3 birds? Ron asked, looking incredulous but too polite to outright complain. He didn't argue, though his expression shifted comically as he turned to Marcus, quirkily lifting his upper lip as if to mock him. The silent message was clear. Looks like you'll be writing even more reports now. Marcus shook his head, understanding the unspoken jab. Yes, Ron. I know. I'll be doing all the reports and sending them to the Lord. As always. Eric, watching the exchange, allowed himself a rare smile. You are dismissed for now. Rest up and wait for your next orders. The duo bowed respectfully, leaving the chamber as the council observed them with pride. Though their paths were demanding, the trust and faith placed in them were unshakable, and their journey was far from over. Eric's plans and Elian's loyalty. Lord Eric stood by the window of the chamber, gazing out at the sprawling estate below. His mind was sharp, considering the next steps. I suppose it's time to meet the Sword King, he murmured to himself. Ron, however, he's made it abundantly clear he won't be coming along. He exhaled deeply, recalling his son's objections. While Ron was gifted, spirited, and growing into his role as a divinant, his refusal to meet the Sword King was steadfast. Eric couldn't force him, not now. Still, the absence of his son meant the responsibility of representation would lie squarely on his shoulders. Eric turned toward the guard stationed by the entrance. Bring Elian here, he commanded. Shortly after, Elian Draveth, Eric's trusted divinant, entered the chamber. The room seemed to quiet as Elian stepped inside, his presence measured but commanding. Loyal to his master beyond question, Elian had served Eric for years, his devotion unwavering. While Elian lacked the extraordinary power of a Blade Lord, his strategic mind, sharp instincts, and divine resilience made him invaluable. "You called for me, my lord?" Elian asked, bowing respectfully. "Yes," Eric replied, his voice steady. "The Sword King has summoned us. I had hoped Ron would join me, but he has declined. I'll respect his decision, though I fear the opportunity missed may one day weigh heavily on him. Nevertheless, we must move forward." Elian nodded, his gaze firm. "I understand, my lord. The boy has his reasons, and he'll come to his own in time. Until then, I'll stand beside you." Eric allowed himself a faint smile. "You always do. Prepare for our departure. This meeting will shape the path ahead." Elian bowed once more. "As you command, my lord. I'll see to the arrangements immediately." As Elian left to make preparations, Eric's thoughts lingered on his son. Ron's independence was admirable, but his reluctance to embrace his full potential as a divinant was troubling. Still, Eric trusted him to grow in his own way, perhaps finding his strength in the unlikeliest of circumstances. Turning to his council, Eric addressed them with the gravity befitting his title. "The Sword King awaits. Our alliances and strategies will determine the survival of humanity. Ensure the estate remains secure while I am away." The council nodded in solemn agreement, their trust in Eric absolute. The wrath of Valtherus. The chamber pulsed with a dim, foreboding light. Valtherus stood motionless at its center, his crystalline throne casting harsh reflections of brilliance across the walls. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of Malric Veilshade kneeling before him, his head low and his eyes unreadable. Behind Malric, the masked figures of the Black Order lingered in the shadows, their presence muted as though they dared not draw the Athenaries' ire. Valtherus's radiance flickered, the light emanating from him cold and sharp like broken glass. Yet it was not the usual controlled brilliance of his divine aura. Instead, it was fractured, unstable, a manifestation of the fury boiling beneath his cold exterior. "The Sorrow Fiends," Valtherus began, his voice cutting through the air like a blade, "failed to breach the defenses of Rugal's city." Failed. The word reverberated through the chamber, its weight enough to make the air feel heavy. Malric's head dipped lower, though he showed no outward sign of fear. The Athenaries' anger was palpable, a force that seemed to charge the very atmosphere with an oppressive intensity. "They were destroyed," Valtherus continued, his voice escalating in anger with every syllable. "Not scattered, not delayed. Destroyed. By the warrior faction, a collection of brutes who have no grasp of the divine. This was not supposed to happen." The light around him flared briefly, illuminating the chamber in a blinding flash. The masked figures of the Black Order flinched, their loyalty unwavering but their resolve tested under the weight of his rage. Still, Valtherus's focus remained fixed on Malric, the leader of this sinister group. Yet, when he spoke again, there was no direct blame in his words, only a cold, biting reprimand. "You carried out your orders as instructed," Valtherus admitted grudgingly. "The Sorrow Fiends were planted where they needed to be. But now," his voice dropped to a dangerously low growl, "those warriors have found a way to eradicate my creation. They have ruined what was to be a masterpiece of control. Once again, the warrior faction, with their meddling and brute force, has disrupted my designs." Malric finally lifted his gaze, his expression calm but his tone deferential. "My lord, their discovery is troubling, yes, but we can adapt. The Black Order is ready to carry out your will." Valtherus's piercing gaze bore into him, his aura flickering with restrained fury. "Ready to carry out my will? Do not presume to comfort me with hollow assurances, Malric. Their discovery threatens not only the Sorrow Fiends but everything. If the warrior faction believes they can neutralize what I have created, their audacity will spread to others." He turned, pacing slowly. "Do you understand the implications of this failure? Faith in the luminaries rests on their ability to save humanity from threats like the Sorrow Fiends. If the warrior faction steps into the role of saviors, the very foundation of our power begins to erode." Malric remained silent, knowing better than to interrupt Valtherus in his rage. His masked associates stood like statues, shadows stretching unnaturally around them. Finally, Valtherus stopped and turned, his eyes blazing with cold light. "This failure will not be forgotten. No, it will fuel what comes next. Let the warrior faction think they have achieved some grand victory. Let them believe they hold an edge. Their arrogance will blind them to the greater storm I shall unleash." His aura flared again, brighter and harsher than before, forcing everyone in the chamber to avert their eyes. Strengthen the sorrow fiends. Modify them if you must. If the warriors have found a weakness, eliminate it. And spread them further, wider. We will drown their defenses in a tide of malice they cannot hope to withstand. Malric inclined his head, his voice calm despite the charged air. It will be done, my lord. Valtherus stepped closer, towering over the kneeling figure. See that it is, Malric. Fail me again, and the shadows you so deftly command will be the first to consume you. Malric rose to his feet with calculated composure, his associates stepping forward as his shadow deepened around them. The Black Order exists to serve the Athenary. We will not fail. Valtherus said nothing further, his figure turning to face the crystalline light once more. But his presence remained oppressive, his wrath rippling through the chamber as an unspoken warning. As Malric and his masked followers retreated into the shadows, one thing was clear. The warrior faction's victory was not a triumph, it was the spark of a far greater conflict to come. This is the end of Chapter 12. Next chapter coming up. The departure as the sun crested the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the Rugal estate. Ron and Marcus stood at the gates, ready to embark on their 2-week journey north. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, filled with dangers they could only begin to imagine. For Ron, however, this wasn't merely a journey. It was the next crucial step in his relentless mission to dismantle the Malice Bloom, a quest that had grown intensely personal. Marcus adjusted his pack, his gaze sweeping the expansive landscape. Well, here we go. Adventure calls. Ron tightened his grip on his horse's reins, his voice resolute. And answers wait. Let's move. With a low groan, the massive gates creaked open, and the two rode into the dawn. The immense weight of their mission was balanced by the thrilling promise of discovery. Behind them, Lord Eric prepared for his own significant journey, heading to meet the Sword King alongside the other Blade Lords. Two paths diverged, each crucial to the fate of humanity. The journey north. In their trusty carriage the road unwound before them, a seemingly endless ribbon cutting through rolling hills and sparse forests where the wind whispered ancient secrets through rustling leaves. 5 days had passed since Ron and Marcus began their expedition, not solely on horseback, but within the sturdy confines of their fully equipped carriage. This was no ordinary vehicle, crafted by the warrior faction. It was a masterpiece designed to endure long travels and withstand the harshest dangers of the road. Their armored war horses, Baron and Grandee, noble and powerful, effortlessly pulled the carriage. More than mere beasts of burden, their sharp instincts and readiness for battle offered an extra layer of security, transforming them into vigilant guardians on the perilous journey. Inside, the carriage was a testament to meticulous organization. Its spacious interior held a trove of supplies, a diverse array of weapons, and a collection of curious tools Ron had carefully packed. Items Marcus usually didn't even attempt to comprehend. Strange devices lay alongside Ron's journals and maps, nestled among investigative instruments, small relics, and various materials Ron was currently studying. There were also compartments for rations, comprehensive medical kits, and even spare wheels, ensuring they were prepared for any eventuality. Ron sat comfortably, deeply immersed in his notes. As the designated brains of the operation, he spent his days poring over survivor accounts, analyzing cryptic patterns, and diligently piecing together the threads of the mystery they pursued. The occasional soft clinking of his tools as the carriage swayed seemed to go unnoticed by him, lost as he was in his world of theories and strategies. Marcus, ever the versatile all-rounder, took on the role of the carriage's coachman. With practiced skill, he handled Baron and Grandee's reins, ensuring the horses were well fed and rested during their stops. He meticulously managed the carriage's maintenance and made sure their supplies were replenished in every village they passed. Marcus embraced his duties fully, guaranteeing a seamless journey while Ron remained entirely focused on unraveling the enigma of the Sorrow Fiends. "Anything yet?" Marcus asked during a rare lull, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Ron looked up from his notes, adjusting a peculiar lens apparatus perched on his head, a tool he used for scrutinizing detailed maps. "Plenty. The sightings aren't random, that much is certain. The Sorrow Fiends appear to follow trails of emotional or physical distress. They're drawn to pain, Marcus. The real question is, who or what is directing them?" Marcus shook his head, a half-smile playing on his lips. "You know, if anyone ever peeked into this carriage and saw all your weird tools and notes, They'd think we were some kind of traveling circus. Or lunatics. Ron smirked, flipping a page in his notebook. Or geniuses. It's a fine line. Marcus chuckled, gently shaking the reins to keep Baron and Grandee moving steadily. Whatever keeps you happy, boss. The carriage's setup. The carriage itself was a marvel of preparedness. Its outer walls were reinforced with light yet incredibly durable armor plating, capable of deflecting stray arrows or fending off minor assaults. Inside, every compartment was intelligently designed for maximum utility. Supplies area, stocked with preserved food, fresh water, and comprehensive medical kits. Ron had even insisted on extra parchment, ink, and wax seals for sending reports back to the estate. Weapons storage, a cleverly hidden compartment at the back, secured their armaments: Marcus's trusty crossbow, Ron's twin blades, and a few experimental weapons Ron had crafted but hadn't yet explained. Tools and gadgets, shelves and hooks neatly organized Ron's investigative tools, from modified lenses to strange devices that hummed faintly with unknown energy, their purpose known only to him. Sleeping space, though compact, the carriage had enough room for a makeshift bedroll, allowing one of them to rest comfortably while the other kept watch. Baron and Grandee received equal care, their feed and armor stored securely alongside the other provisions. Marcus ensured their horses were pampered at every stop, knowing their strength and unwavering loyalty were as vital as any weapon they carried. The adventure continues. As they traversed small villages, Ron continued to meticulously gather information. Survivor accounts remained disturbingly consistent: strange whispers, shadowy figures emerging from an unnatural mist, and an unsettling stillness preceding attacks. Each town added more fragments to Ron's expanding puzzle, and Marcus couldn't help but admire his friend's relentless curiosity. "You're starting to make me nervous," Marcus quipped one evening as they set up camp. "The way you're connecting dots, it's like you're already planning the big showdown." Ron didn't look up from his notes, but his smirk was unmistakable. "Just planning ahead. You should try it sometime." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head as he checked on the horses and the carriage. "And here I thought I was the organized one." As the 5th day drew to a close, they camped along the edge of a quiet forest clearing. The sturdy carriage stood nearby, a comforting presence as they prepared for the night. Baron and Grandee grazed contentedly, while Ron remained lost in thought, scribbling theories and calculations under the dim glow of their lantern. Marcus stretched, glancing at Ron. "You know, this carriage is starting to feel like a second home." Ron grinned faintly, closing his notebook. "It's not bad. A little cramped, but at least everything we need is here." Marcus patted the side of the carriage affectionately. "Yeah, well, let's just hope it holds up if things get messy." Ron's gaze turned thoughtful as he stared into the dancing campfire. "They will get messy, Marcus. But that's the point. We're chasing the truth. Whatever happens, we'll be ready." And so they rested, the road ahead still long and uncertain. But as the fire crackled and the warhorses stood guard, their resolve remained unshaken. For Ron, the Sorrow Fiends represented more than just a mission. They were another step closer to unraveling the mystery of the Malice Bloom. And for Marcus, every mile traveled was another chapter in an adventure he wouldn't trade for anything. The journey to Havenford, the northern winds grew sharper, carrying whispers of distant storms and the chill of isolation as the duo ventured deeper into the rugged terrain. Windmere loomed as their ultimate destination, the fabled town where the Sorrow Fiends were first sighted, a place steeped in unease and swirling with the icy gusts that gave the region its name. Reports from the Rugal Familia archives painted Windmere as the birthplace of horror, the genesis of the spreading malice. But just as their carriage rumbled along the main road, Ron abruptly called a halt. He insisted on a detour, an additional day's journey, to a nearby town known as Havenford. Perched like a fortress amidst craggy cliffs and frost-laden plains, Havenford was an imposing structure designed to withstand the harsh northern elements. Its towering stone walls spoke of military precision, of warriors who had carved a living out of resistance and defense. Inside the carriage, Ron laid out his reasoning for Marcus, his tone imbued with the weight of calculated deduction. "Marcus, think about it. If Windmere is the birthplace of the Sorrow Fiends, and Havenford is so close, it's impossible Havenford wasn't attacked. The fortress must have encountered the fiends. Yet, according to the archive reports, Havenford isn't mentioned in any of the major attacks. Why?" Marcus shrugged, his hands steady on the reins as Baron and Grandee pulled the carriage over frost-bitten earth. Maybe their defenses are just that good? Ron shook his head, flipping through his notes. It's not just their defenses. Havenford managed to completely ward off the Sorrow Fiends. There has to be more to it. Either someone there possesses knowledge about the fiends, or they have a divinant in their ranks strong enough to repel them. Think about it. If a divinant is stationed there, we'll feel safer, and more importantly, they might have crucial information. Besides, Ron added, leaning forward with urgency, if Windmere is the source, then whoever first informed us about Windmere's link to the fiends might be hiding in Havenford. Maybe they sought asylum there, or maybe they're deliberately keeping quiet about what they know. Marcus raised an eyebrow, absorbing the implications. So, you think the missing link to Windmere's story starts here? Ron nodded firmly. Absolutely. If we find the informant, or even clues about them, in Havenford, we can get ahead of this. I'm not going straight to Windmere without knowing every angle. Havenford, the fortress town. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, Havenford appeared, its towering walls casting long shadows over the rocky terrain. The fortress itself was a testament to the grit of the northern lands, its architecture designed not for beauty, but for survival. Snow-dusted stone ramparts braced against the relentless winds, and banners bearing intricate crests fluttered violently as if battling the fierce gusts. Havenford streets were narrow but well-maintained, winding through clusters of sturdy buildings that seemed to grow directly from the stone. The town was clearly built for defense, its central plaza lined with barracks, its guard towers staffed with vigilant sentinels. The townsfolk moved briskly, their rugged features and practical attire hinting at lives lived under constant preparation for conflict. Ron and Marcus eased their carriage toward the gates, where they were greeted by a pair of guards clad in thick, fur-lined armor. Their piercing gazes swept over the carriage, lingering briefly on the warhorses before moving to the duo themselves. "What brings you to Havenford?" one of the guards asked, his tone measured but curious. Ron spoke with his usual confidence, holding up the Rugal crest that proclaimed their status. "We're emissaries from the Rugal estate. We need to speak with your head elder. There's urgent business regarding the Sorrow Fiends." The guards exchanged glances, their stoic expressions flickering with unease at the mention of the fiends. After a moment, they stepped aside, gesturing for the carriage to enter. "You'll find the elder in the central hall. Follow the main path." Seeking the elder's wisdom inside the fortress town, Ron and Marcus wasted no time. As Marcus ensured their carriage was properly stored and Baron and Grandee were tended to, Ron navigated the stone-paved streets toward the central hall. Its entrance was flanked by towering statues of warriors, their swords raised in silent vigilance. The elder of Havenford, Eldrick Vaughn, was a figure sculpted by years of experience. His commanding presence filled the room, his silvered hair tied neatly, and his sharp eyes assessing the duo before him. A jagged scar stretched across his left cheek, a mark of battles long past. "So, emissaries," Eldrick said, his voice deep and steady. "What brings the Rugal estate's attention to our northern fortress?" Ron bowed respectfully, though urgency laced his tone. "Elder Vaughn, we're investigating the Sorrow Fiends. Windmere is said to be their origin, but some reports hint at a connection here, your town, your fortress. Anything you know, anything your soldiers might have seen, could be crucial." Eldrick's expression darkened slightly, his fingers tapping against the armrest of his chair. "The Sorrow Fiends." He leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Yes, they've passed through. Their whispers, their mist, my sentinels have seen their shadows. But their presence here is fleeting, like smoke carried by the wind. It seems deliberate, as if avoiding a direct confrontation." Ron's eyes narrowed in thought. "Avoiding? Why? It doesn't make sense for them to target Windmere but avoid Havenford, especially with its strategic importance." Eldrick shook his head. I don't know. What I do know is that Windmere bore the brunt of their attacks. Here, we've only glimpsed them. Whatever they are, they seem drawn away from places fortified like Havenford. Perhaps it's the strength of our ranks, or the presence of our divinants." Ron exchanged a glance with Marcus, already scribbling notes. "Thank you, Elder. Anything else? Any patterns or symbols? Something we can use?" The Elder paused, his gaze turning distant. "There was one thing. A survivor, mad with terror, spoke of a shadow in the mist. Not a fiend, but something commanding them. A shape, indistinct yet powerful." He exhaled slowly. "If you're following the trail, Windmere is your next step. But beware, whatever you find there will test you. A change in plans. The midday sun cast a warm glow over Havenford, its fortress walls standing tall against the endless stretch of northern wilderness. After 5 long days of travel, the elder, Eldrick Vaughn, graciously offered Ron and Marcus accommodations to rest and recover. While Marcus was quick to express their gratitude and discuss the minor delay this might cause with the elder, Ron, true to his impulsive nature, unilaterally accepted the offer without waiting for Marcus's input. As Marcus accompanied the elder to ensure the carriage was securely parked in the fortress's safe storage, he muttered under his breath about Ron's rashness. Baron and Grandee were led away to a sheltered stable where they could rest and graze under the watchful eyes of Havenford's sentinels. Marcus, ever the meticulous planner, made sure the carriage was properly locked, double-checking their supplies and noting anything they might need to replenish. When he returned to Ron's side, he found him already issuing instructions. "Go ahead to the room," Ron said, his tone casual but firm. "Don't wait for me." Marcus raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. "What are you up to now? You're not coming with me?" "No, I won't," Ron replied, avoiding eye contact as he scribbled something in his notebook. He tucked it away before standing. "Anyway, make a report once you get to the room. Send it back to the Rugal estate. They deserve to know where we are and what we've learned so far. Don't miss any details." Marcus frowned. "At least tell me where you're going." Ron hesitated only briefly, a sly grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Well, I think I'm going to fill my belly with some alcohol." That was enough for Marcus to sigh in resignation. He knew better than to contest Ron's choices. The man was impossible to stop once he had a plan in mind. "Fine," Marcus muttered, "but don't get into trouble." Ron chuckled softly. "No promises." It wasn't until Marcus was halfway to their room, muttering to himself about Ron's priorities, that a thought struck him. "Wait a minute. Ron doesn't drink." He came to a halt, glancing back in the direction Ron had gone, but then sighed and shook his head. "Whatever he's doing, he'll manage. He always does." The spy in disguise. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Ron's intentions were far from simply grabbing a drink. He had already begun his transformation, shedding his usual travel attire for something completely unassuming, almost shabby. While roaming Havenford earlier, he had spotted a passerby wearing an old, plain shirt, its edges frayed and its color dulled by years of wear. He had approached the man and offered him a handful of coins in exchange for the garment. The surprised passerby, not one to decline a generous deal, handed it over without a second thought. Now dressed in the worn, ill-fitted shirt, patched trousers, and a weathered hood, Ron looked like a completely different person. He had intentionally chosen to look disheveled, just enough to blend in with Havenford's rougher crowds. The faint, unwashed smell of the shirt added an extra layer of authenticity. The more natural, the better. Ron's destination was clear: the local tavern, a place buzzing with chatter and free-flowing gossip. If there were secrets about Havenford's connection to the Sorrow Fiends, or, perhaps, an informant hiding in plain sight, this was the most likely place to find them. But instead of arriving as Ron, the emissary of Rugal Estate, he arrived as someone else entirely, an inconspicuous, thug-like wanderer whose appearance told no tales of his noble ties. As he approached the bar, he pulled his hood low over his face, scanning the crowd with practiced precision. The tavern was lively despite the early hour. Rowdy laughter echoed against the wooden walls, and mugs of frothy ale clinked together as patrons exchanged stories and curses. Ron slid into the shadows near the back, his eyes studying the patrons. He didn't want to stand out, but he didn't intend to waste time, either. Somewhere in this noisy sea of drink and bravado, there might be answers. He signaled the barkeep, ordering a drink he had no intention of touching, and leaned back casually against the wall. This was a game of observation, of listening without being noticed. "Let's see," he murmured to himself, scanning the room with a faint grin. "Who here knows more than they're letting on?" The eyes and ears of the tavern Ron sat in the dimly lit corner of the tavern, his hood casting a deep shadow over his face. Though his eyes scanned the crowd only briefly, his primary focus wasn't on what he could see, it was on what he could hear. As a divinant, his ability to amplify his senses set him apart from even the most seasoned warriors. With a subtle shift in his breathing, he tuned into the cacophony of conversations swirling through the room. He raised his mug to his lips, the illusion of casual indulgence complete, though he didn't drink. The sharp tang of alcohol assaulted his nostrils, deepening his distaste, but he didn't let it show. To anyone watching, Ron looked like just another patron enjoying a drink, but inside, his senses were sharpening like a honed blade. Table 1. A pair of farmers discussed the harsh northern winds, their voices gruff but ordinary. They complained about the season's poor crop yield and the need to repair a broken wagon wheel. Harmless. Table 2. A group of traders boasted loudly about a deal struck earlier in the day. Their words rang with pride but held no hint of secrecy or intrigue. Unimportant. Ron's hearing shifted, reaching further, capturing fragments of conversation from every corner of the room. Table after table, he dissected voices and tones, searching for anything that stood out. But every conversation sounded mundane, ordinary. Farmers, traders, travelers, their words were filled with the common struggles of daily life. No whispers of sorrow fiends. No shadowy figures conspiring in the mist. No hints of anything unusual. A flicker of frustration crossed Ron's face, though he masked it quickly. This town is too normal, he thought to himself. For a place this close to Windmere and tied to reports of the fiends, there should have been at least a rumor, a clue, something. What's my play here? His eyes wandered to the bartender, standing behind the counter. The man wiped down a mug with practiced efficiency, his movements steady but unremarkable. To most, he'd seem unimportant, a simple fixture of the tavern. But Ron knew better. A bartender was often the true center of any establishment like this, an unofficial gatekeeper of secrets and gossip, privy to stories from every traveler passing through. Ron decided to gamble. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a gold coin, and set it down on the bar with an audible clink. The sound caught the bartender's attention, his eyes flicking briefly to the coin before returning to his task. Ron didn't speak, simply letting the gesture hang in the air, waiting for a reaction. The bartender's movements slowed slightly, just enough for Ron's trained senses to pick up on it. A flicker of curiosity crossed the man's face, followed by careful neutrality. He finished wiping the mug, set it down, and approached Ron with a measured stride. "What can I do for you?" the bartender asked, his tone even. Ron didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, pretending to consider his drink while his mind worked like clockwork. His eyes, though half-hooded, analyzed every detail of the man's appearance. The bartender's short-cropped hair was streaked with gray, neatly combed but slightly damp with sweat from the heat of the tavern. His nose was slightly crooked, likely from an old fight, and his hands bore faint scars, the kind earned from years of manual work or combat. This man had seen conflict, perhaps more than he let on. Ron's senses extended further, noticing the subtle way the bartender's eyes swept over the room every few moments, assessing the crowd. He wasn't just serving drinks, he was watching, listening, calculating. This man knows more than he's letting on. Finally, Ron spoke, his voice low and unassuming. "You seem like a man who hears things. Gets a good read on people." The bartender raised an eyebrow, though his expression remained cautious. "It's part of the job." Ron tapped the gold coin, letting it spin briefly before it came to rest. "I'm looking for stories. Strange ones. Whispers of shadows in the mist. Travelers disappearing. Anything that doesn't feel ordinary." The bartender's eyes flicked to the coin again, lingering a moment longer this time. He reached out, his fingers brushing the coin before pausing. "Stories like that don't come free," he said carefully. His tone was nonchalant, but Ron caught the subtle change in his posture, the slight straightening of his spine, the shift in his weight. The man was testing him, gauging how much he really wanted the information. Ron smirked faintly. "Good thing I don't expect free. But I do expect honesty. Think carefully before you speak, friend." His tone, though calm, carried an undercurrent of authority, a subtle reminder that he wasn't just another tavern drunk. The bartender studied Ron for a moment longer, his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to unravel the man before him. Finally, he nodded, pocketing the coin. "All right, I might have heard something, but it's not the kind of talk people like to share openly." Ron leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "I'm not most people. Start talking." This is the end of Chapter 13. Next chapter coming up. Chapter 14. Ron's calm demeanor shattered as the bartender leaned in, a knowing smirk twisting his lips. His voice dropped to a low whisper. "You're not really from here, are you? I've never seen you before. And I knew from the start, buddy. You didn't even sip your beer. Relax, this isn't a shady bar. You're overthinking things." The revelation hit Ron like a fist to the gut, his stoic mask momentarily crumbling. "Wait, what?" All my effort, pretending, going undercover, observing people like a mastermind, and it was pointless. His thoughts raced, backtracking through every meticulous detail. The passerby's shirt he'd chosen, the shabby disguise he'd crafted, the conversations he'd analyzed at every table. All for the bartender to casually dismantle his facade with a single, simple observation. The bartender chuckled at Ron's stunned expression, clearly amused by the absurdity. Look, I'm used to seeing people come in here looking for information. You should have just asked from the beginning. His casual honesty cut through Ron's elaborate strategy like a blade, leaving the divinant truly dumbfounded for the first time in ages. Ron sighed, his facade crumbling as he leaned forward on the bar. All right, fine. You caught me. I'm not from around here. I'm sorry. Looks like you're pretty seasoned at handling people like me. The bartender grinned but didn't respond immediately. Ron, ever the strategist, took another moment to reassess. For the first time, he saw past the bartender's apparent simplicity, realizing his perceptiveness came from years of watching patrons pass through the tavern. The man's demeanor might seem ordinary, but he'd clearly earned his expertise through observation and experience. Shady? Maybe a little. Honest? Definitely. Okay, Ron said, leaning in slightly. You seem to know the ins and outs here. What can you tell me? The bartender pointed toward the next building, lowering his voice to a near whisper. Second floor. Looks like a coffee shop, but it's more than that. They sell information there, for a price. It's an open secret around here. If you were local, you'd already know. He slid the gold coin into his pocket with a casual shrug. And by the way, I'm keeping the coin. Thanks for that. Ron stared at him blankly for a moment, completely stunned. Wait, so that's it? Dumbfounded was putting it lightly. The man had just casually flipped the script on Ron's entire strategy. Yes, that's it. Welcome to Havenford, the bartender replied with a faint smirk. A parting gift. Ron turned to leave, pulling his hood low again. But before he stepped away, a thought struck him. He turned back to the bartender, who was already wiping down another mug. Ah, maybe it's just me, Ron started, gesturing toward the long-haired person sitting near the window table, but I noticed they seem into you too. The bartender raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. Someone's into me. Huh? Ron reached into his bag and handed the man a spare eyeglass, a simple lens designed to enhance vision. Here, use this. You'll see clearer. And thank you, by the way. Taking the eyeglass with visible hesitation, the bartender put it on and glanced toward the table by the window. His reaction was immediate and visceral. The long-haired person Ron had pointed out wasn't quite what the bartender expected. It was a man whose delicate facial features gave off an initial impression of femininity. The bartender nearly jumped back, muttering, "Damn," as if his entire perception had been shaken to the core. The shock seemed to reverberate through his body, and he stumbled slightly, gripping the counter for balance. "What is wrong with you?" he muttered under his breath, glaring at the eyeglass like it had betrayed him. Ron chuckled under his breath and walked out of the tavern, leaving the bartender behind to reevaluate both his eyesight and his choices. The coffee shop connection. Ron arrived at the coffee shop with none of his previous antics, walking directly up to the desk person without hesitation. The shop had a charming facade, warm lights and the enticing aroma of roasted coffee, but the upstairs floor held the true purpose of the establishment. As the bartender had said, this place sold information. "I need information," Ron said directly, his tone sharp and decisive. "I'm buying." The desk attendant, clearly unimpressed by the lack of pretense, motioned toward the stairs. "Second floor. Speak to the manager." Ron nodded curtly. No disguises. No pretending. Lesson learned. He climbed the stairs, ready to face whatever price the manager might demand. If this place truly held the missing link to the Sorrow Fiends, it was worth every effort, and every coin. The encounter with the information broker. Ron pushed open the creaky wooden door, stepping into the dimly lit room on the second floor of the coffee shop. Before he could take in his surroundings, a voice greeted him, smooth and almost amused. "Good afternoon, Sir Ron Rugal. You had quite a funny display at the bar." Ron paused, blinking for a moment as the figure came into view. A man sat casually behind a simple desk, his features sharp and his demeanor exuding confidence. He was clearly an information broker. His mannerisms, his air of knowledge, everything pointed to it. But the familiarity in his voice was what really struck Ron. He hadn't expected to be recognized so easily. For a split second, Ron considered asking the obvious question, "Who are you?" But something about the man, his tone, the way he was already addressing him by name, made Ron change his approach. This guy already knows me. He was watching me. With that in mind, Ron decided to play it cool, acting as though he was completely unfazed. "Do you know why I'm here?" Ron asked, his voice calm, adopting the same air of confidence. The broker leaned back in his chair, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Why, of course." The elder himself went ahead and asked for information. "He was thinking of helping you." That revelation hit Ron harder than he cared to admit, but he kept his composure. Inside, though, he felt like throwing his hands in the air. The elder already got the information? I could have saved myself the trouble. Should have waited for the elder to tell me everything. The broker continued, clearly enjoying Ron's unspoken frustration. "Everything's already been paid for, so I wouldn't mind telling you what I know. I've already shared the details with the elder. The survivor from Windmere, Havenford's defenses, everything. No secrets, no shady dealings. Straightforward." Ron exhaled sharply, realizing there wasn't much left for him to dig up here. "You seem to know exactly what I'm looking for." The broker's faint smile turned into a grin. "Yes, and yes. But I'm a businessman, Sir Ron. And while the elder's inquiries were already covered, you're an additional opportunity. If you want more, something extra, it'll come at a price." Ron narrowed his eyes, leaning slightly forward. "How much?" The broker shrugged nonchalantly, his grin never fading. "Depends on how much you're offering. The depth of the information is just the depth of your wallet." The broker's offer. Ron leaned casually against the edge of the desk, his sharp eyes fixed on the broker. Despite knowing the answer was unlikely, he decided to press forward with a bold approach. "Who's the source of this sorrow fiend? And who are you people, really?" His voice carried an air of confidence, though in his mind he already anticipated the evasive reply. This is either a tease or a test. Let's see how he plays it. The broker's faint smile faltered, replaced by a look of quiet disappointment, or was it irritation? His hands rested on the desk, and he tilted his head as though scrutinizing Ron's intentions. "First question," the broker said, his tone clipped, off limits. He let the words linger before leaning forward slightly. "Second question? Easy. Become a regular member, and I'll answer that for free." Ron raised an eyebrow. "Member? What do you mean?" The broker's grin returned, sly and knowing. "Ah, you know exactly what I mean. Don't act coy. You're smart enough to figure it out, aren't you? We're interested in you, Ron. You're a valuable asset." Ron's posture stiffened slightly as he studied the man, his mind working quickly to decipher the subtext. "Valuable asset?" he echoed, feigning nonchalance. The broker leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but calculating. "You have access to information, warrior faction information. You travel to places most people wouldn't dare, and you're chasing stories about the malice. People who ask questions about sorrow fiends usually have information to share themselves. And we, Sir Ron, are not just brokers. We're buyers of information too." Ron's eyes narrowed. He had to admit the man made a solid point. He wasn't just here to gather information, he also carried insights others might pay dearly for. But even so, this was a game he needed to control. "So, you're not a shady organization," Ron said evenly, testing the waters. The broker chuckled lightly. "We deal in shadows, yes, but we're not shady. Call us what we are, information brokers. We sell, we trade, and yes, we buy too. And you, Sir Ron, are exactly the kind of person we'd like to work with. Think about it. Why limit yourself to one side of the table when you can sit on both?" The offer hung in the air, tempting yet laden with implications Ron wasn't ready to untangle. But for now, he played it cool, his mind carefully filing away every word the broker said. "Regular member? Huh? Looks like I just stepped into something much bigger than I thought." The broker straightened his posture, pulling his hands off the desk as if ready to move on. "Now, about your offer for more information, it all depends. The depth of what you want is the depth of your wallet." The grin was back, smug and composed. Ron smirked faintly. "I'll keep that in mind. But for now, I'll stick to what's already been paid for." And with that, the room shifted back to silence, both men quietly sizing each other up, aware that this exchange was only the beginning of something larger. The broker's presentation. The room was quiet as the broker began his next move, a calculated display of the kind of quality and depth his network could provide. With a faint smirk, he pulled out a thick stack of documents, placing them on the desk in front of Ron with deliberate precision. "Let me show you what the Elder has asked," the broker said smoothly, his tone exuding a mixture of confidence and professionalism. Ron watched silently, his sharp eyes scanning the pile as the broker began to separate the papers into distinct sections. These weren't just casual notes, they were detailed reports compiled with care, and each sheet seemed to hold valuable insights about the Sorrow Fiends and Havenford's connections. "First stack. This," the broker began, pointing to the first stack, "is the report made by Havenford's soldiers. Detailed encounters, defense maneuvers, observations of the Sorrow Fiends, and strategic notes from the fortress's leadership. Second stack." He slid the next stack closer to Ron. "Here we have witness testimonies, compiled from survivors who fled Windmere or encountered the Fiends near Havenford. Locations, descriptions, and even fragments of their emotional state. They've been thoroughly recorded." Third stack. Another set of papers followed, the broker continuing his systematic display. "And here," he said, tapping the stack, "are maps with locations of the witnesses, tracking the Sorrow Fiends' movements. Alongside that, you'll find extra documentation, the kind most people wouldn't care about. Weather patterns, unusual animal behavior, the sorts of things that seem irrelevant but often hold hidden clues." Ron leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued despite himself. The broker wasn't holding back. He wasn't just presenting information, he was showcasing value. Even the pieces that seemed unnecessary painted a clear picture of the thoroughness of the network. The man wasn't simply trying to impress, he was sending a message: "This is the level of detail we deliver." Ron's assessment. Ron furrowed his brow slightly, flipping through some of the documents. As a divinant and experienced investigator, he had an eye for spotting gaps and inconsistencies in information. But to his surprise, everything here seemed well organized, thorough, and surprisingly free of embellishments or speculation. Even the extra details, things he wouldn't normally care about, helped provide context for the larger story. If this is what they offer routinely, then this broker means business. He glanced up at the man, who was watching him carefully, clearly aware of Ron's silent scrutiny. The broker smiled faintly, as though he knew exactly what Ron was thinking. "You seem to be analyzing the quality of what we provide. That's good. As I said, we're not shady. We deal in facts." Ron leaned back slightly, his mind working as he reassessed the broker's motives. It was obvious now. This guy really wants me to join their network. The documents presented were overkill, more than Ron had asked for and far beyond what the Elder likely needed. And the extra effort didn't feel random. It was deliberate, meant to paint the broker's organization as trustworthy, thorough, and professional. "You seem to be really interested in getting me to join," Ron said bluntly, tapping the edge of the desk. The broker's grin widened slightly. "Of course we are. You're chasing Sorrow Fiends, digging into the malice, things most people avoid altogether. People who ask about such things usually have their own insights. And you, Sir Ron, have access to information others don't. Warrior faction insights, Rugula state details, first-hand observations. You don't just find information, you make it." The broker paused for effect, his voice lowering slightly. "Think about it. Joining us isn't just about buying information. It's about trading it, expanding it. You could sit on both sides of the table, gaining far more than you ever would as just a buyer." The twist in the offer. Ron tilted his head slightly, intrigued but cautious. "So you're not just selling me information. You're trying to recruit me. Why wouldn't we?" the broker replied smoothly. "You're valuable, Sir Ron, and we think you're smart enough to see that. But don't misunderstand. We're not forcing anything. You can walk away with just what the Elder paid for, no strings attached. Or," he gestured toward the documents, "you can dive deeper. Your choice." Ron thought for a moment before smirking faintly. "Fine. Tell me the price for more." The broker's grin returned in full force, his hands folding on the desk. "Like I said, the depth of what you want is the depth of your wallet. You tell me how far you're willing to go, and I'll make sure it's worth every coin." "The deal is struck." Ron leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady as he broke the silence. "Fine. An information for an information." His tone was unwavering, a perfect balance of confidence and calculation. The broker's smirk widened, clearly pleased with the direction the conversation had taken. But before the man could respond, Ron interrupted sharply, his voice cutting through the room with precision. You pay in advance. I'll pay you when I get back. Information for an information. The broker blinked, momentarily taken aback by the boldness of the proposal. But then amusement flickered in his eyes, and he leaned back in his chair, letting out a quiet chuckle. Ron Rugal, a divinant, a warrior beyond most, and now a master of the information trade. The broker couldn't help but be impressed, not just by Ron's ability to negotiate but by the sheer confidence with which he carried himself. Interesting, the broker said, the amusement in his voice undeniable. He nodded once, clearly approving of the deal. Very well, I agree. An information for an information, no payment up front. You impress me, Sir Ron. Most people hesitate when it comes to playing this game, but you're decisive. Remarkable. He paused for a moment, his sharp gaze studying Ron intently. This man isn't just a buyer, he's a player in the larger game. A reliable informant, someone who sees the value of trading and building relationships without being pressured into commitments. The broker calculated Ron's survival rate based on the information he was about to receive and found it high. And more importantly, he saw Ron's value not just as a buyer, but as a source, someone who might eventually return with insights that even his network would find priceless. The broker's grin shifted, his tone lowering into something more businesslike yet still cordial. Now, ask me, he said, his words delivered with an air of finality, as though the deal had already cemented their understanding. The room seemed to pause in anticipation, a deal established, and both men knowing that this was only the beginning of a complex exchange. Ron wasted no time, his calculating mind already forming the first question. This conversation was now his, and he wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. This is the end of Chapter 14. Next chapter coming up.